going to talk about charity in this one, and this one might be a little bit longer than some of the others just because there's several changes happening with charity. First of all, at present, there was a rule where originally cash donations to what I'm going to call normal charities, traditional charities, were capped at 50% of AGI. And through a number of bills over the past 5 or 6 years, they've moved that up or down, 100%, 60%. It landed at 60%. So you can give 60% of AGI to charity, to this type of charity, which are called 50% organizations. That has stayed. Anyway, that was supposed to potentially sunset. They're going to keep that. So 60% of AGI can go towards this type of organization. You may remember from the CFP exam that there's other types of organizations like private foundations that have different caps. But anyway, that's going to stay at 60%. I guess we'll have to call them 60% organizations. Let me show you in the software where we handle these. I'm going to give away some of the answer a little bit later of some of the other changes on charity. First of all, I've got $100,000 of total income, and I had no deductions above the line deduction. So I have $100,000 of AGI. So that means we would expect, if I'm giving money to a normal charity, $60,000 of that charity can be deducted. So here's an example I gave. And again, I'm going to give away some more stuff later on with the floor. But let's say I give $70,000 to charity. Remember, I had $100,000 of AGI. Here we're showing that after the AGI limitations, I'm able to give $60,000 of that. Again, that's the piece that stays. All right, so moving on to the next thing, which is new in 2026, is there is now a 0.5% AGI floor on deducting charity. So in this case, it was a nice round number. We had $100,000 of AGI, and so 0.5% of that is $500. And so the actual amount I'm able to deduct in this case is the 60,000 minus 500, 59,500. Now, there's nuance in the calculation around how it's going to handle these different flavors of deductions. It's going to, and we're not totally sure how it behaves with carry forwards, but we're pretty confident we got this part right as far as like what is the actual deduction amount. We'll have to see about how the carry forwards all work. So what's happening with this, though? I mean, basically, you recall this is what we're used to with the medical deduction. The medical deduction, also on Schedule A, has an income floor. And so what happens is it behaves like a bit of a phase out, right? And I'll show you on range calc what's going on here. Actually, let's do that now. This one's a pretty small impact on range calc. Let me actually show you. Range calc is going to show you something interesting. Actually, let me run range calc. So recall, those of you who aren't familiar with range calc, what that piece of the software does, that functionality does, is it takes my baseline scenario that I just entered, and then it allows me to rerun the tax calculation, adding $1,000 of extra income every time, so I can see the behavior of the total tax as we add income over time. Now, I'm not going to show you the phase out of the charity real quick. Let me show you this row. Look at this. I'm in the 12% bracket, but as I'm adding income, I am actually only paying just under 5% income, 5% tax on that next $1,000 of income. Well, why is that? Well, I don't know if you can see here, but down below this blue piece, I'm actually getting my charity to phase in. Remember, because I gave $70,000 to charity, I was capped at $60,000. So as I add income, more of my charity is allowed to be deducted. So that's what's happening here. That's why charity phasing in is offsetting income that I'm adding. Now, but we're here to talk about the phase out, and it's almost impossible to see. Let me see if I can zoom in and even see it. I don't know if you can. It's super tiny, but basically, as I add income, basically a piece of that extra income is causing some of my charity to phase out because of that floor. This is much more pronounced in range calc when you're looking at the medical deduction phase out, because that's a 7.5% floor. But the charity one is super tiny. So honestly, from a planning perspective, should we do much with it? I don't know. It does make donor advised fund maybe a little more valuable, because if I'm giving to charity every single year and I have to get over that hurdle rate every year, that 0.5% hurdle rate, maybe it's more valuable to bring all my charity into 1 year with a donor advised fund. man, but at these levels, it's not super compelling, honestly. There's other more compelling reasons within this tax bill to look at donor advised funds for grouping deductions. Yeah, and just to kind of clarify on the impact, let's say that, because it's so hard to see in range calc, it's almost impossible to really like put numbers behind it, but imagine you have a client who makes, let's say, $1 million of AGI. That 0.5% floor is $5,000 of deduction lost to them. In the 37% bracket, that's $1,850 in taxes. And so again, that's someone who has $1 million of AGI. The impact is $1,850 in taxes. Again, that's real money, but on a percentage basis, it's not really a huge deal. But there is this now 0.5% floor, AGI floor on charity. The other thing they added is a way to deduct charity even if you take the standard deduction. You may recall in 2020 and 2021, they did something similar. And now the literature is interesting on this. Like, we read the bill and we read it to be a below the line deduction, which is what it was in 2021. I've seen a few articles that's calling this charity thing a above the line deduction, which is what it was in 2020. There is a precedent for that, but the math was a disaster on that. So we're really hoping it's below the line, honestly. Let me monkey with things a little bit so that we make sure that we're taking the standard deduction. So I'm going to lower the amount I'm giving to charity. Let's say we're only giving $5,000 to charity. All right, it's $5,000 to charity. If I were itemizing, I would be able to itemize $4,500 of that, again, because of that floor. But we're not itemizing because that's my only deduction. So we're going to take the standard deduction. Now, so the standard deduction here, I took that. This is the year 2026. You can see, though, on this new field we have below, we put it down by QBI, we have this new line called standard deduction charity. And so what you get is basically for joint filers, you get $2,000 of a deduction. For anybody else, you get a $1,000 deduction. There's no phase outs or anything like that. You can take this just as long as you take the standard deduction. So the one thing for me that's a message for advisors is, if you have clients who give to charity and for whatever reason have not traditionally itemized, so examples would be people who are generally all their charity goes through a qualified charitable distribution, or clients who just take the standard every year because they just don't have enough itemized deductions, they may not be accustomed to saving receipts or keeping a record of those charitable donations they give to their church every week, or the Boy Scout troop, they give them some money for their camp or something like that. Like, they may not be keeping track of that, but now they should, because a married couple, they get up to $2,000 of extra deduction. So it's worth keeping a record of any and all charity that happens, even if traditionally they've never really recorded it on their tax return. Now's the time to do it. I think as a reminder too, you should remind your clients that property, I think it's $250 when you give property to like Goodwill or something like that, Salvation Army. You don't need a receipt up to $250. I could have that wrong. Anyway, the point is, look that up and make sure your client understands that rule, because a lot of people will give away stuff like that, and generally they get the little sheet of paper receipt and throw it away. But now there's actually a real reason to record those donations as well. So there you have it. 3 things to keep in mind on charity. 1, it's now permanent, this 60% of AGI cap on the the deductibility of charitable donations, which is up from what it might have been, 50. It's been 60 for a while, but it was about to revert back to 50. The other piece is the new 0.5% floor on charitable deductibility of charity. And then the third thing is the new below the line, we think below the line, deduction that you can take on charity up to $2,000 for joint filers, $1,000 for everyone else, that you can take even if, or actually only if, you take the standard deduction.